Well, thank y'all for being here. Thank you for being very patient. The Senate wasn't there today, so we had to do a little work and poke a little fun while we were there. But thank y'all for being here and being patient. And this is the Appropriations Subcommittee on General Government. So, but again, thank y'all. Thank y'all members for coming on over. I know the weather was terrible outside, so thank you for getting to work safely. But anyway, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I am Sam Watson. I'm from District 172. I am the new chairman of this committee. I would say I'm the new Chad Nemmer, but I'm not quite the tree hugger that he is. So, but anyway, it's good to be here, and I'm honored to serve in this capacity and look forward to working with everybody in this room as we move forward. And if you don't mind, I'll just open us up with a quick word of prayer, and then we'll let the members introduce themselves, starting at the other end. But let's pray. Dear Father, just thank you for this opportunity to be here. Thank you for getting us all here safely. Just hope and pray that you'll return us all home safely. Just thank you for the resources that you've blessed this state with, and just be with us as we make sure that we use them properly. In your name we pray. Amen. What number?
27. Here I am. Clay Perkle, District 155. It's Tifton, Osceola, Fitzgerald, Douglas area. Ashburn.
Good afternoon, Lynn Smith, House District 70, part of Coweta County, part of Carroll County, and the city of Noonan. Thank you.
Timothy Barr. I have the privilege of representing District 103, which is North Gwinnett County and South Hall County.
Representative Jimmy Pruitt from Eastman, Georgia, District 149, Dodge County, Telfair County, Wheeler County, part of Lawrence County, and part of Jeff Davis County.
David Clark, State Rep for District 98, which includes the cities of Beaufort, Sugar Hill, and Suwanee.
Brian Prince, District 127, parts of Augusta, Richmond County, and Jefferson County.
All righty. Well, thank y'all. We'll go ahead and get started. Commissioner Ryan, thank you for being here, and if you want to go ahead and get started.
Chairman, thank you members of the committee for allowing me to come present to y'all on our amended FY19 budget. I'm working from page 12 of your tracking sheet, section 12. First off, I'd like to say that, we good on volume? First off, I'd like to say that we are very supportive of the governor's budget for amended, so I will start with that. If you look, we have 3 changes to our budget for AF19. The first one, 12.5.1, is an increase in billings for liability insurance premiums to reflect total expenses for claims. What we do, for those of you who are not familiar with DOAS, most of our funding is not directly from y'all, from general funds. Most of the way we make our revenue for the department is charging assessments, again, for the agencies that we support. We're back office, but we also serve as the state's insurer. And so for liability claims, we are in a position to pay those. This $15 million should leave us with a surplus of roughly $5 million at the end of the fiscal year. So I'll let you do the math on what happens if we don't get the $15 million. We would end in a deficit. I would tell you that ending in a deficit does not mean that the state of Georgia does not settle its claims. We still would. However, we would not be able to pay them, and any claim not paid accrues interest at a 7% rate. Happy to answer any questions on these as I go through them quickly or at the end. Y'all are in charge of that part. The second one, 12.5.2, is to provide one-time funds for the subsequent injury trust fund assessment so that we may receive subsequent injury claim reimbursements. For those of you not familiar with SITF, it's a fund that was set up in the early 1970s to encourage employers, including the state of Georgia, to hire folks who had previously been injured on the job. Should they be injured again, this fund then covers that as far as insurance is concerned. The state of Georgia has to pay in to access funding from that to cover these subsequent injury claims. So this roughly $5 million is our fee for FY19. We usually wait until amended for this because that fee can fluctuate year to year, and amended gives us a better idea of what that will be. And then finally, 12.5.3 is an increase in funds for our cyber insurance premiums to reflect claims expenses. That's $500,000. In FY18, the legislature, this is one of our rare direct appropriations. In FY18, the legislature, along with the governor's office, worked to purchase a rather large cyber insurance policy that covers most state entities for the state. The $2.8 million initially that was given to us, 1.8 was used for funding premiums. The additional $1 million was left in reserves at the Department of Administrative Services. The reason for that is so we purchased third-party insurance. That insurance does not kick in until the state of Georgia has spent $250,000 per claim. Then the insurers will step in and cover any dollar amount above that. As we saw with the city of Atlanta, these claims can get fairly expensive fairly quickly. Through the governor's office, the Georgia Technology Authority, and the legislature, the decision was made that we did not want that for the state of Georgia. These policies are in place. However, we have had several experiences in our first year with it. This is to make sure that the reserve remains healthy, because if the state cannot pay that initial $250,000, it cannot access the additional coverage. The additional total coverage under this program is $100 million. So we want to have access to that. We need to have this first position funding. And that is it for changes for us for amended. Happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Y'all do a good job. I know you're a behind-the-scenes guy that nobody really knows about, and y'all do a lot of work over there. And insurance is not a fun business either. So I know y'all have had a lot of work this past year with Hurricane Michael as well. But got a couple questions here.
Sure thing.
23 is Representative Barr.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Just a quick question on the 100 million. That's a big number.
Yep.
What type of things would that cover? What does that entail? Just so I have a better understanding of what we're doing.
Sure. So that policy covers everything from a ransomware attack, which is what the city of Atlanta experienced, all the way down to an incursion that could occur through phishing. So from an employer with a state entity clicking on an email and giving people access. A lot of what goes into this is, so first what you want to do if you've had an experience with something along these lines with a cyber incident, you're going to want to do an investigation, because the first thing you need to do is figure out how the bad actors got in. The next thing that goes along with this policy, and I will say that those investigators are fantastic, and those are supplied by the insurance company. We just pick up the first part of the tab. Okay. After you do that, you want to make sure that you've taken all necessary steps to prevent any event like that from occurring again. So depending on what the attack looks like, these can get fairly expensive fairly quickly. Again, City of Atlanta, I think they're on the hook for about $13 million. That's not an amount of money that I want to come back to y'all and say that we need to access to try and fix something that occurred. So the most that we would be on the hook for any one incident would be the $250,000, and then the insurers would kick in on top of that.
Thank you. That's helpful for a builder to understand. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, 22.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple things. One, on this subsequent injury trust fund, I guess wasn't aware of that. But if a company hires somebody that has a previous injury and has been on workman's comp and things like that, and they come off of it, you are very reluctant sometimes to hire that person, particularly if they have a pattern. But you're telling me that under this program that if a company hires that individual and they do have another injury, and I'm assuming a different injury or the same injury reoccurs, then it will not hit the workman's comp from the individual company and raise their workman's comp rating?
I'd have to lean to my actual insurance sale. No one's actually called me an insurance guy before, and I'm going to try not to take offense at that.
And you don't want to be called that, I know.
No,
that.
it's actually, we have 5 business functions at DOAS. It's the biggest one. But yes, any business in the state of Georgia who is self-insured, so state of Georgia is technically self-insured. You're looking at a lot of your big companies like Home Depot. Mm-hmm. This is a pot of money that's out there. So for any subsequent injury that someone experiences in a workers' comp claim, that would actually be paid for. It would be settled out of this amount of money and would not hit your direct workers' comp. So this is separate from that, and so these cases are handled separately if there are subsequent.
Can I get a follow-up, Mr. Chairman? Yes. Well, these may be small companies that are not self-insured. That would hire this individual.
Sure, this fund's only open to entities who are self-insured. So you'd have to be a company. And the state of Georgia is technically self-insured. So,
And I know it's not your fault, but my question would be then, we're not really encouraging small businesses to hire these people who have had previous injuries.
sure, I would not actually be able to comment on that, as the fund was set up 7 years before I was born. But yes, but I think I don't want to speak out of turn, but you are probably correct there. It would not cover most small businesses if they can't afford to self-insure, which generally they are not able to.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, one more question, if you don't mind. On the cyber insurance, I'm assuming do we take bids on that?
Let me ask. So Wade Dameron is the head of risk management for the state of Georgia underneath me. Wade, can you chat briefly about how we actually picked our insurers for this?
Sure, absolutely. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Wade Dameron, Director of Risk Management Services with DOAS.
Can you get the microphone right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Come on over.
Again, Wade Dameron, Director of Risk Management Services for DOAS. Yes, sir, great question. We utilize a broker. So our broker is one of the world's largest brokers, Willis Towers Watson. So we engage with Willis Towers Watson to provide us insurance-related services, and then they go out when we recognize an exposure that we would like to have insurance for. They do that process of putting out our application, putting out a proposal to the markets, and then we have the markets come in and provide us quotes around the particular structure that we'd like to build. That's how we wind up building a $100 million policy. So we'll have domestic markets and international markets working through that individual broker to provide us that proposal. And we look at that, we do a renewal process on an annual basis.
Great, thank you very much. I
Yes,
appreciate
sir,
it, Chairman.
thank you.
Thank you. 27.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question regarding, there again, the subsequent injury trust fund is one-time funds, and it's to build up a pot of money and for the claims that would arise. Over the many years that we've had this pot of money, and I know it changes every year. It's a pretty unique number. How much has it grown?
Wade, do you want to come back up? What I can tell you what I can tell you before Wade does is, so the state of Georgia, along with other insurers, pay into this fund every year. We have worked with OPB the past fiscal year or so. It's a very oddly funded and run fund, in the sense that we have to pay our assessment, but in order to file claims, we actually have to front money for those claims to SITF. That money then comes back to us in order to pay the funds, and we can immediately recycle that into paying off another case. So this is for the assessment. Additional funding that you've seen in past years, or I think it was actually built into FY19, was actually to give us a pot of money that we could immediately start cycling to SITF to get claims paid, and we get a full reimbursement from the fund for that initial funding. Part of the reason we want to do that is this fund is set to sunset in 2023, which I believe would be the 50th year of the fund. So we're trying to address, and this is not a huge portion, I want to be clear, it's not a huge portion of our outstanding liability for workers' comp, but this is an amount of money that's available to us now to pay these claims. And so we're working to accelerate those payments to get these settled before this fund sunsets. But I will let Wade comment on the total funding level.
Yes, sir. So the Subsequent Injury Trust Fund has its own director. It's a state agency as well with a board of directors. And so on an annual basis, they'll look at the outstanding liabilities as they sit for the claims that have been reported to the SITF. They'll have actuarial analysis that determine what the rate is that an employer will pay. So for our example, for this assessment, I think we spent about $86 million in fiscal year 17. And so we report that on an annual basis. They do the math based on, I believe it's 6.1 cents per dollar to come up with our assessment.
Thank you.
Jim? All righty. Anybody else? Well, Commissioner, I don't see any more questions. You've done a good job. I am going to have to get you a different koozie there. I see you got an Ag Pro koozie there. We need to get you a Laster tractor koozie down there, I think.
I look forward, as long as it's at the same low price of free that I got this one at.
We'll do that. Appreciate the job you're doing. Thank y'all.
Thank you, sir.
All right, next, Commissioner Williams, you want to come on up? DNR.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I think most of you know Terry West, but if you don't, this is Terry West, my deputy commissioner's up here with me today. And my report is very short. The only enhancement to the amended budget is found on page 12, line 34-9-2, and it is the Wildlife Endowment Fund. Every year we try to guess, or the legislature tries to guess, how many lifetime licenses we're going to sell. The good news is we sold a lot more this year, so that's an increase of $1,016,000. And that's short and sweet, Mr. Chairman. That's the only change.
We needed you at the 8 o'clock meeting this morning. No, appreciate the job y'all are doing, and thank you for being here. And while you got the mic up there, would you mind just commenting on the status of GOSA?
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows where we are on that and how that's moving along.
Sure. We hired a young lady named Taylor Brown early in the summer to start getting us ahead on it. We met with a lot of outside stakeholders and NGOs, put together sort of a steering group to come up with criteria and buckets and the point system for ranking the projects. The speaker has named his 2 members, and the lieutenant governor has named their 2 members, so the trustee board is in place. And we feel like we're right where we need to be. As you remember in the bill, there's a lot of transparency and a lot of steps that everything we do goes through, the projects and even our rules and criteria. So after session, we'll be taking the criteria portion to our DNR board, and then move it through the trustee board. And then, of course, when we come back in January, Terry's got these dates a lot better than me, but when we come back in January for this committee, we'll also have oversight over all that. So we're very excited about it. Great program. Thank you for carrying the bill. We do have some things that we need to fix this year that you and I have talked about, and we're getting that set to go. It's nothing material with the bill, it's dates that we have to have changed so we can meet the intent of the legislation.
Well, thank you. I'll open it up for questions. Anybody got anything, comments? 23.
Always appreciate you, and thank y'all for what you do. There was a comment on the House floor this morning. I was not sure if you're aware. Just didn't know if any of your fellas had reported seeing any senators in any holes anywhere on their patrols today.
Well, as a former member of the House, the upper chamber, I have to get along with everyone. You know, we're all God's children in this world. But we didn't get any calls from senators.
Thank you.
Well, y'all are involved in a lot of different things across our state, but rounding up senators might be a first. So, but anyway, we do appreciate the job y'all do. In all seriousness aside, I know with Michael and all the things that happen across our state, y'all are always all hands on deck and ready to go to work, and that says a lot for your agency, so thank you.
Well, I speak for the entire agency. We couldn't do it without y'all's support, so thank y'all.
Yes,
Really
sir.
Appreciate it.
All right. Thank y'all. Anybody else? That's
And
it. Thank you.
Rick Dunn's coming for me.
Yes, sir. Director Dunn, you got a big packet here. I'm a little nervous. Glad we scheduled you for the afternoon.
And members of the committee, thank you. I could do this 2 ways. I'd prepared a small dive into our base budget, or I can just focus on the changes.
I think we can just go with the changes.
Okay.
I know Chairman Smith is here, and she'll probably have you doing
Absolutely.
more details later in her
Absolutely.
committee, and so we'll just stick with the money.
Absolutely. So I'm working off the tracking sheet, the AF amended fiscal year 19 tracking sheet. We have 3 programs under DNR, section 34 on page 51, the Environmental Protection Program, the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, and the Solid Waste Trust Fund. I'll just go through the changes for the amended fiscal year. We have 4 changes, really 5 changes. And the first one is just a statewide change. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Hold on just a minute here.
Yeah, so are we working off the governor's budget or the tracking sheets? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. 34, we're 34.3, that's environmental protection. 34.4, which is the hazardous waste trust fund. And 34.8, which is the solid waste trust fund. Those are our 3 programs within the DNR budget. And we have, I'll focus on the changes there first. In 34.3, environmental protection, the first item, 34.3.1, is a statewide change. Commissioner Ryan just talked about that's our piece in the adjustment of the DOAS risk premiums. 34.3.2, this is an increase in funds to cover incurred expenses in the agriculture water metering program. EPD assumed control of the agriculture water metering program from the Soil and Water Conservation Commission in December of 2016 through an executive order from the governor. That order was codified with SB 451 last legislative session. When we received the program, we had to absorb staff. We had a fund office out in Dawson, Georgia, and we had a metering contract that all came with the transfer of, a meter reading contract that all came with the transfer of the program. We were able to absorb those costs through an internal transfer, and so for at least the first year, we were able to handle those costs internally. The financing for the actual installation and cost of the new meters is handled through the governor's water supply program, which is administered by GFA. And this financing is through the issuance of GO bonds, general obligation bonds, issued in, I believe, 2013, 2014, and 2015. And we have $20 million of those bonds set aside for the metering project. Not all expenses associated with the program are what I call bondable. Things like staff are not bondable, not a capital expense. Postage and printing is not a capital expense. If you're replacing a battery, for example, on a meter, that's not a capital expense. So we have a lot of expense that are not bondable. And what this item is, the 215-272, is to true up our budget to account for those additional expenses associated with the agriculture water metering program that are not bondable or not eligible for bond reimbursement through GFA. The second item, the third item under environmental protection, the caption says provide funds for statewide water planning. This is, we didn't write the caption, but this caption is, deals with a storage contract at Lake Lanier. And I'm not sure if you have it here on your tracking sheet, but if you go to DCA's budget under the One Georgia program, you'll see a larger item. It's 16.6.1. And let me, if it's okay with you, Mr. Chairman, share with the committee a little bit about the Lanier water storage contract.
Yes, please do.
Okay. So in 16.6.1, we have $14 million roughly for the caption again is funds for statewide water planning, and we have another $82,000 here in EPD's budget. This is for, again, a water storage contract with the Army Corps of Engineers for Lake Lanier. And just let me give you a little background on that. Today, about 22% of Metro Atlanta receives their water directly from Lake Lanier. And the history of this is a little interesting. Only the cities of Beaufort and Gainesville have a permanent right to water stored in Lake Lanier. They have about 20 million gallons a day. This is from back in the late 50s when those two cities, Beaufort and Gainesville's water intakes were inundated with the filling of Lake Lanier. So in compensation for the destruction of their water intakes, the Corps granted those two cities permanent storage rights, permanent withdrawal rights from Lake Lanier. I believe it was 1958. In the 1970s, the Corps, particularly Gwinnett County, but also Cumming and some others, they were granted contracts, not permanent storage rights, but contracts to withdraw water from Lake Lanier for water supply. This, of course, led to the growth of Gwinnett County, the growth of Forsyth County, all of those things having those contracts. But those contracts, again, were not permanent. They were renewed on a regular basis. In the late 1980s, the Corps decided to given the growth we've seen in Gwinnett County and Forsyth County, given the fact that these jurisdictions do not have permanent access to this water source, the Corps proposed reallocation of storage in Lake Lanier for Metro Atlanta to meet its water supply needs. Actually saying there's a piece of the lake that we're going to permanently hold back for water supply. We propose to do that. That action was immediately challenged by Alabama and later Florida, and that was the beginning of the tri-state water wars. In 2000, the state of Georgia submitted a request to the Army Corps of Engineers for the state, on behalf of the state, to reserve water storage in Lake Lanier to meet municipal water supply needs. The Corps refused that request. They said, look, this is under litigation. Whether or not water supply is an authorized use of the federal reservoir project, we cannot grant your request, particularly as much water as you want at this time. It's beyond the Secretary of the Army's authority. So they denied that request. We immediately sued. And so for all these years, since the late 1980s, this has been under litigation. In 2011, the Court of Appeals decided or ordered that water supply was an authorized use of Lake Lanier and ordered the Corps to act upon Georgia's 2000 water supply request. So in 2017, the Corps did act upon that. We had to revise our request because it's been a long time and we have different projected needs, but the Corps acted upon our request in 2017 and decided to allocate roughly 254,000 acre feet in Lake Lanier. That's about 23% of the active storage in the lake to meet Metro Atlanta's water supply needs. So what this, I'm going to kind of loop back to this item. What this item is the Corps granted us water storage rights. Under federal law, we have to pay for those rights. We have to compensate the federal government for the cost of building and maintaining that project. And the cost is kind of broken down in three buckets, so to speak. First of all is the first cost of storage. That is the basic cost incurred by the federal government to build the reservoir. Of course, we don't have to pay the whole cost, but we have to pay our proportionate share if they're going to give us permanent storage rights. That cost is roughly $60.5 million for that first cost of storage. The second cost associated with this is the annual operation and maintenance cost for the reservoir project. Every authorized user of the lake has a proportionate share of the cost to the Corps to operate Buford Dam and the other projects associated with Lanier. Our share of those operation and maintenance costs is roughly $418,000 a year. That's a cost that's assessed every year. They reassess the cost every 5 years, and that would be perpetual. I should hop back to the first cost of storage, the $60.5 million. Once that is paid off, that's a cost. Once that's paid off, the contractor, in this case the state of Georgia, will have permanent rights to that water in perpetuity. The O&M costs are something that's due every year, and there's a third cost, RR&R, rehabilitation, repair, and replacement. That's for major capital projects associated with the dam. It's never been assessed on authorized users before. It's kind of a one-time thing. Can't predict what it would be, but that's another potential cost that's out there because it's not annual, because it's not regular. There's no money in the budget. So what you see for in the budget, under the DCA budget, One Georgia budget, as well as in our budget. So we've got the 254,000 acre feet of storage. We're not in the water supply business. So we're going to allocate that storage to water supply providers who are currently reliant upon the lake for withdrawals. Right now, they don't have a permanent contract. They don't have permanent access to that storage. We're going to get that storage and allocate it to them. We're going to allocate roughly 80% of the storage. Our request to the Corps was for our water supply needs for Metro Atlanta through 2050. That is a projection. That is an educated guess. We're not sure if it's going to actually be that number or how much water we're going to need through 2050. But not only is that a guess, but where growth will occur around the lake is a guess as well. Because we don't know for certain where the geographical distribution of that need is, we're not going to allocate all of the storage we have. Rather, we're going to allocate 80%. That's enough to meet our projected water supply needs for the next 20 years through 2038. And then as where growth emerges, where water needs emerges, we will begin to allocate the rest. So what you see under the One Georgia funds, the $14 million, that is the state's share of that unallocated storage that we're holding back, that we're not billing the water supply providers for because it's not theirs yet. So we're holding back. We'll have to pay for that first storage cost for that share of unallocated storage. And then over time, as we allocate, that money will come back to us. The people who are purchasing that storage from us will have to pay us interest and all of our previous costs, and we'll be able to return that money back. But initially, we need that $14 million for that initial cost of storage. The item you see here on 34.3.3, that's the first year's operation and maintenance costs. It won't be a full fiscal year, so that's a portion of our share of the operation and maintenance costs that's not allocated out to the water supply providers. Does that make sense at all? That's a lot, but it's a complicated thing, so I'll be happy to go through the math or anything like that if needed. Okay, and the last item we have is under 34.4. This is the first item, increase funds for hazardous waste cleanups. Every year in the amended budget, the state of Georgia maintains what's called a hazardous site inventory, HSI, and that's kind of the state of Georgia's Superfund list. Superfund's a federal program. There's the worst of the worst is on the Superfund program. We maintain the HSI, which is our hazardous site list. These are sites where there's been a release of a hazardous substance that's yet to meet cleanup standards. Most of those sites have a responsible party or with enforcement action on that responsible party to clean up those sites. However, about 61 of those sites are abandoned. There's no responsible party. We've kind of prioritized those sites, which sites have the greatest risk to human health or safety, which sites have potential for redevelopment, which sites may need a little bit of work to get them off the HSI. We prioritize those sites. We have 10 sites we have prioritized, and this funding, part of this funding, will go to begin work on remediation of those sites, abandoned sites on the hazardous site inventory. That's about $3.75 million of those funds, of that $5 million that's used to remediate those sites. We also, we have 2 sites in Georgia, in Camilla and Brunswick, that are beginning to emerge out of the federal Superfund program. And under our agreements with EPA and the Superfund program, the state, EPA handles 90% of the cleanup costs for those Superfund sites, but the state's responsible for all of the operation and maintenance costs after those sites have been remediated. So if you have an engineering control or something like that and you have to maintain it forever, the state's responsible for those costs. So we have roughly $285,000 of this item here that's we're starting to take responsibility for the ongoing operation and maintenance costs of those remediation efforts from the federal government. So that's the second bucket there of that $5 million in change. And third, under the statutory formula under the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, a certain portion of funds appropriated to our budget must be held back for municipally owned landfills that are on the hazardous site inventory. We have about 130 municipal landfills on the hazardous site inventory. This is a part of the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund is a formula. We have to hold back funds to allow for reimbursement of municipalities when they clean up those landfills. And so that's driven by statute, and that's the remainder of the $5 million in change there in 34.4.1. Mr. Chairman, that's our amended budget, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
All right, we'll take some questions. 24, Chairman Smith.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Hey there.
Actually, I held my breath the whole time you were talking about
no.
what we're doing with Lake Lanier. Almost, it's amazing to the committee members who are new. We can't emphasize enough how important it is to meet all our obligations with our water wars for the state as a whole. On the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, we always get questions as committee members, how much do we bring in each year and how much is allocated out? And if you could explain that just briefly. Thank you.
It does. There's a chart in your handout that talks about collections and appropriations but for the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund in particular, as you know, Chairman Smith, this is funded, there's tipping fees for each ton of landfill and municipal solid waste landfill. 75 cents of that, per ton of that tipping fee goes to EPDs, collected by EPD. We give that money to Treasury, and then this subcommittee, the Appropriations Committee, then appropriates money to the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund. Last year, I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but roughly we were collected roughly $14 million, and I believe we were appropriated $11 or $12 million. Historically, it's been about 62% of collections that's been appropriated, and there's a long chart. If my numbers are off, I can.
One more.
Yes.
This is more an observation,
Mhm.
but in difficult budget times, that's when the money is pretty much not going all to the intentions of the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund, but it looks like you're building your numbers back up. That'll be an important question to our committee.
That's correct. And again, we have prioritized 10 sites we think are our highest priority, and the appropriations we've been given is sufficient enough to deal with those 10 sites. So.
And one of them is Brunswick, the paint. Which one?
I have a list. One of the O&M sites that's coming off the Superfund is a former wood preservation site in Brunswick.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you, Mr. Chairman.
I can give you, I think David has a list
Okay.
of the sites.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you very much.
Chairman Pruitt?
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. The solid waste trust fund is
Yes,
like
sir.
the automobile tires and things like that.
It's a
correct?
$1 fee on each replacement
Right.
tire sold in the state.
Is there any other revenue that comes into that other than tires?
There are some fines and fees as well,
Okay.
but
And
the vast
again,
majority.
Same question that Chairman Smith asked about how much comes in from that.
I believe, and I'm speaking from the top of my head, but roughly $7 million collected last year. I believe about $3 million was appropriated.
Okay.
And again, I want to emphasize, however, the primary task of that fund is to fund our solid waste activities and to remediate abandoned scrap tire piles. And we are doing both of those things with the funds that have been appropriated.
Well, thank you. One last question, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. We've had this trust fund for many, many, many years.
Yes, sir.
I know it can be used for different things, but the question is, are we eliminating the problem, or is the problem getting worse, or is it getting better? Do you see the cost of cleanup under the, or the money being used for the trust fund for cleanup, I'm assuming also?
Mhm.
Is the need going down? Is it the same? Or we got the word out? Are we stopping it? And the reason I'm asking this, because just this past weekend, I was at home, and one of my friends who owns about 300 acres or so in the industrial park area, he came home, he lives out of town, he came home, and people had dumped thousands of tires on his property. And he said, do I call anybody? Who can I get? He called the county, and the county said, we don't go on private property. And so, is this something he can have help with cleaning up? I'll tell you, he already cleaned it up. He paid some people to come clean it up, but I'm just asking how the fund can be used.
That is exactly the type of thing the fund is used for.
On private or public land.
That's correct. As long as the person who owns the land is not the responsible party. Of course, first we will try to identify a responsible party.
Sure. First
Before
thing,
that's the
cameras
first thing.
and hopefully they come dump some more.
Absolutely,
but,
we'll
yeah.
try to identify. But in terms of the larger picture, I believe the scrap tire problem is better, but it's not eliminated. I don't think we'll ever eliminate it. But right now, we've got about 65 known abandoned scrap tire piles that we're trying to clean up, and that number always stays pretty constant. One of the exciting things we've done is, and really we really started it last year, there's been some minor efforts before then, is fund amnesty days with local government. So residents of a county or a city can bring in their abandoned tires to a pickup site. The city or county will take those tires, properly dispose of those with a recycler, and we reimburse them for the cost of doing
That's
so.
great. I didn't know that. That's wonderful.
Yes, sir. It's been very, very successful. I'll be happy to share with you a list of counties and cities, but last year, over 250,000 tires were collected, scrap tires collected through that process.
Well, these people who pick up these tires from automobile tire dealers or tractors or whatever it may be, I'm assuming they have to have a business license.
They do. They
Are
have
we
to
not
be.
doing a good job of vetting these people? Or, I mean, obviously that's where the big dump comes from, is somebody taking them and taking advantage of the system by
Right.
pocketing the
We
money.
have a regulatory system, which is what the trust fund, where what we call generators of scrap tires. There's about 7,000 licensed generators of scrap tires. We have people who come pick them up and bring them to a recycler or the final for shredding or whatever the case may be. Each one of those pieces are licensed, and so there's like a manifest that goes with those. That's the stuff we don't have to worry
There's
about.
something about,
But the generators who are not in that system that we're unaware of, and
So-
the carriers who are not in that system, that's where the problem emerges.
okay, but most of the tires have to be generated by somebody that actually sells tires. It can't be individuals, I don't think, out there accumulating this
You'd
kind
be
of-
surprised.
Really?
Right.
So, but they're not, so if they're accumulating them, they're not picking them up from some dealer that actually sells tires.
That's correct.
This is just people changing their own buying.
Our problems are not with the 4,000 tire establishments that I talked
Yeah.
about. Our problems are people who are operating on the outside of that.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just
they may-
wondered if
they
there's a
may
better way
collect
we
them
could
from someone
monitor
for a
it, is all I
fee.
was getting at. It may
Mhm.
be a different way we could monitor it, but
Mhm.
if it was, you'd already figured it out, I'm sure. So thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, I'm familiar with the amnesty days, and
Mhm.
they've had those in Colquitt County, and they've
Uh-huh.
been very beneficial to our community, and especially with all the tractor tires and all the trailer tires and everything that we have there. That's
And we hope that would, at some point, reduce the number of subsequent dumps.
right,
Mhm.
right. That's right. All right. Representative Perkle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Madam Chair, I must say, if you held your breath while he was doing all through the Lake Lanier thing, you have got quite the lung capacity, I must say.
You're lucky I didn't do the deep dive into the base budget, so.
But I do have a question regarding the Lake Lanier, and the 14 million is it's a pretty big number. And so let me from the great detail that you did show us, if we could look at a quick dive.
Mhm.
So we've identified our water needs for the usage of Lake Lanier for the next so many years.
Yes, sir.
The Corps of Engineers, the Army Corps of Engineers, basically has estimated the cost of the Lake Lanier Reservoir development at 60 some odd million.
Mhm.
We need approximately 20 some odd percent
Correct.
of the
23.5.
capacity
Mhm.
of Lake Lanier
Mhm.
for our future water needs
Right.
for those users.
Correct.
And if you just did a rough estimate, you would multiply the 60 some odd million dollars by the 20 something percent, and you're going to get close to that 14 million bucks.
Right. So the $14 million is, so under our water supply requests, 96% of that was for existing withdrawers with their population growth over the next through 2050. How much, based on per capita water use, how much water would they need? We also have 4% of our requests for potential future withdrawals, Dawson County, Lumpkin, people who are not yet. So that made up our request. We're allocating 80% of that 96%.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the 4% holdback. So in total, we've got roughly 23.5% of the cost of that storage that traces back to that $14 million.
And of the $14 million that we're allocating, that we're looking at the allocation
Correct.
currently,
Mm-hmm.
we anticipate being able to recoup that investment from the users of the water, correct?
That is correct.
Over time.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Chairman Smith, did you have something?
It's an observation about the tires and the solid waste trust fund. And so the state and the trust fund comes in at the end of the problem, when we have the problem. But we have legislation, it's egregious litter, it's all types of litter that our local governments can pass ordinances for. They can police it, they can get there out ahead of the problem. So I'm just kind of trying to give us a beginning and the end. We come in as the state when it's bad.
Although the regulatory program is an attempt to, the fact that we're
Yeah.
licensing generators, how many tires did you sell? You know, that you remitted the dollar per tire from. Who did you give those to? Are they a licensed
Right.
hauler? That whole regulatory program is
It's
also
good.
to try to prevent those
Right.
dumps from happening.
And that's good. But the bad actors,
Yes.
you have laws to enforce against bad actors. But usually the answer I get back is, well, help us find them. So, but appreciate what y'all do.
Thank you.
Well, I don't see any other questions, Director, and I'll just echo what Chairman Smith said. You have a difficult job at EPD, and we appreciate what you do. Obviously, from the questions of tire issues, difficult problems, water being another issue that we've dealt with for a long time and continue to deal with, but it's important to our state and especially to my economy back home. So appreciate the work y'all are doing there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I don't see any other questions, so if nobody has anything else, we're adjourned. One quick announcement is we will try to meet in the morning at 8 o'clock.
Okay.
So we'll stay tuned, but that's the
What
plan right now.
room?
We'll be in this same exact room at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Thank you.
All right,
Mr.
thank y'all.
Chairman.